All right, guys, welcome back. Earlier today, I released the hot information that the rumor of 23andMe merging with VGAC is no longer a rumor. That deal will go through as long as the respective shareholders approve the merger. Stay tuned, we'll talk about the details. All right, some people are wondering why in the world Virgin Galactic Acquisition Corp would want to merge with 23andMe. It doesn't sound nearly as glamorous as some of the SPAC deals that have been taking place. Earlier today, there was an investors presentation where Virgin listed their reasons of why they think 23andMe is a great choice. So we'll go over those in detail. The first one, they feel that 23andMe is disrupting the healthcare experience. Now maybe you're thinking, wait a minute, 23andMe is involved in healthcare? I thought they just determined a person's ethnicity and where they came from. So let's just talk about how 23andMe is involved in healthcare. In the United States, it's estimated that 25% of healthcare spending is wasteful. And 75% of consumers wish their healthcare experience could be more personalized. And when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, the probability of success for a drug being approved, a process which can take about 10 years and cost about $2.6 billion, is less than 12%. 23andMe thinks that getting consumer scale can be empowering and a key to disrupting the current healthcare system. For them, that disruption comes from collecting DNA samples from millions of their customers. They do that through their retail DNA kit. A customer provides a saliva sample and they mail that back to 23andMe, and then 23andMe analyzes it for multiple things. In 2015, they received FDA authorization to provide carrier status for inherited conditions. They can also now inform a woman of her BRCA status. That's a genetic mutation that predisposes a woman to developing breast cancer or ovarian cancer. They can inform a woman of her BRCA status, and there are other genes now that they can let a person know if they are predisposed to certain illnesses. They say that 80% of their customers receive a report with a meaningful genetic variant. They have found 12,000 customers with increased risk for chronic kidney disease, 6,000 customers with that BRCA gene that I mentioned, and 7,000 customers who have hypercholesterolemia variants. Those are people who have elevated cholesterol levels that might put them at increased risk for heart disease. Now, here's an example of how this can work on a personal level. So many women don't have a family history of breast cancer, or they don't have an ethnicity that might predispose them to breast cancer, and therefore they don't get tested for the BRCA gene. However, when they submit this sample, 23andMe will check that, and they will inform the woman if she is at increased risk. And therefore, she could confirm that test and then decide whether she would like to mitigate those factors with her physician. Now, you may be surprised to know that 80% of the people who submit a genetic sample to 23andMe give consent to have their DNA included in studies. In fact, one of their co-founders, Ann Wojcicki, said the mission of 23andMe is not just about genetics. We want to transform healthcare. What I have learned after 11 years is that people want to participate in research. They don't want to be a human subject. They want to be respected as an equal and as a partner in the process. When it comes down to their health service, this is what they can provide: 14 health predispositions. They can tell people about 8 wellness factors. There are more than 40 carrier statuses that they can let people know if they're carrying a certain gene that would put them at risk to passing that on to their descendants. And they can also talk about pharmacogenetics, how certain drugs may or may not react within their body. Let's talk about the second reason. VGAC says that 23andMe has the premier recontactable genetic database. What are we talking about there? All right, when we talk about scale and recontactability, 23andMe has approximately 10 million people that they have collected genetic material from. Now, if we look at some of the other databases around, Regeneron is at about 1 million. Nobody else, at least on this list, has gotten that high. This is an interesting one. All of the United States, 366,000. So 23andMe has a vast genetic library. I like to think of this as a library. When it comes to scale, And they have information about these people to be able to get in contact with them again. Not only that, but they survey these people to find out what sort of health problems they're having. This is the other good thing about their database, is that they are collecting phenotypes. The phenotype is the expression of a gene. You might carry a gene, but if it's not expressed, then it might not be causing health concerns for you. So through those surveys, they are gathering information about the phenotypical data from this genetic material. The number of surveys that they do is tremendous. They're accomplishing 30,000 daily surveys. All right, let's talk about the third reason. They say they're recognized and trusted brand with leading engagement metrics. Certainly 23andMe has been around for more than a decade. Here are the services that 23andMe offers. There's the basic service where you just get your ancestry plus some traits. They'll give you 30 traits and a DNA relative finder. If you pay $100 more at $199, you get the same service plus 60 health reports and features, as well as health predisposition reports. Those will let you know if you are predisposed to developing a disease, not necessarily that you have the disease. They'll also give you carrier status with that $199 service. Now, something new that they've started is the 23andMe Plus membership. Right now, that cost is also $199, but it does involve a $29 per year membership fee. What do you get with that? Well, in addition to the $199 level service, you also get instant access to exclusive reports as well as heart health reports and pharmacogenetic reports. Those are the ones that will let you know if there are certain drugs that may or may not work well in your body. They also can provide a migraine report, an obstructive sleep apnea report, and in addition to that, when they develop new reports based on the genetic material that they continue to analyze, you will have access to those new reports as well. Subscriber service is new. The soft launch for that occurred in October of 2020. As of January 2021, they had about 75,000 people who had signed up for that. In the next few years, they expect to have about 2 million people registered as recurrent users or subscribers. Let's go down to reason number 4, institutionally sponsored therapeutic efforts. A broad pipeline has been established in collaboration with pharmaceutical companies and research companies. The big one here is GlaxoSmithKline, so let's talk about these collaborations. In 2015, it was reported in Forbes magazine that 23andMe had signed a deal with Genentech. It was $10 million up front with up to $50 million if the data turned out to be useful for developing a Parkinson's treatment. Of course, way back then, they only had about 650,000 people who had given consent, as opposed to about 8 million people now. They also have made other deals with companies including Lundbeck, Janssen, Biogen, Allen Lam Pharmaceuticals, and of course the big one has been GlaxoSmithKline. In 2018, they signed an agreement with GlaxoSmithKline where GSK invested $300 million in 23andMe. In return for that, for the next 4 years, GSK would have access to 23andMe's genetic database. That deal can be extended for an additional year. And in return for that, 23andMe agreed not to enter into any new partnerships that would be focused on drug target discovery. That did not apply to any pre-existing partnerships that they already had. Those could go forward. So that deal with GSK, in addition to a $300 million equity investment, there's a 50-50 shared costs and profits. And 23andMe has access to GSK technology and platforms. GSK is delighted with this collaboration with 23andMe, stating that it is exceeding expectations and helping us advance a new way of thinking about drug discovery. This is another way that 23andMe is helping with healthcare. So in the United States, it's about 7 years on average to bring a drug just to a phase 1 clinical trial. And as I mentioned earlier, it's only about 12% or less of those drugs that will ultimately get approved. So 7 years of hard work and only 12% or less of those will get approved. Now, with 23andMe, for a CD96 drug that they've been working on, that time to clinical trial has been brought down to about 4 years, and they see that the likelihood for success can be doubled with using their genetic database. Now, how does this come about? Well, because of their large sample of genetic material, they have a lot of people with a lot of diseases. Now, some diseases are very prevalent, like high cholesterol. In their database, they have almost 1.8 million people. But some diseases are not that prevalent. For instance, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis at only 4,300 people in their database of almost 10 million. Now, if you're a drug company and you want to do studies on people with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, you've got to be able to identify these people. That's where 23andMe can help, because they already have the genetic material from these people, and now the companies can do research on those genes to see if their drug can be useful. Here's another example of real-time genetics health research. COVID-19, we all know about that. They kicked off a study back in March of 2020. Since then, they have enrolled 1,100,000 people to participate in this study, and in September of 2020, they were able to print their findings. They actually have a website now where you can go and put in a bunch of data, and it will give you an idea of how severe COVID-19 might be in you. All right, the fifth reason that Virgin gave for merging with 23andMe says multiple avenues of value creation. So their income streams derive from three primary sources. We have the consumer, the person who's paying $99 up to $199 and perhaps the $29 a year annual membership fee. Then we have their data platform. Certainly that is all of the genetic material that they have collected and to that vast library and how that can get used. And then the therapeutics end of it, that deal with GlaxoSmithKline said that they were sharing in the profits of anything that gets developed from their genetic database. Where else might they have income streams? Well, wearables, perhaps people who have been identified as a certain carrier of a gene or a health risk factor, wearables. Perhaps those people can be targeted by producers of wearables. So there's a potential future income stream. These are some of the other market opportunities that they see potentially in telehealth, which is a $250 billion market, global prescription drugs, $825 billion market, and pharmacy R&D, a $190 billion market. Now, some of the financial data, I covered some of this in a quick news flash that I put out earlier today. The big thing to take away is that 23andMe sees their future growing. They anticipate having a total of 11.2 million people that they've acquired genetic material from in 2021, and they show that their customer acquisition costs are decreasing significantly. Again, some of their financial data, in 2020 they had almost 10 million people that they had collected genetic material on. They produced $305 million in revenue for fiscal year 2020, which you'll notice is significantly less than fiscal year 19. What happened there? Well, some of that certainly can be attributed to COVID-19, and some of that is attributable to privacy concerns. So let's talk about privacy concerns. I mentioned earlier that 80% of their customers are giving them consent to use their genetic material in research. As this database grows larger and larger, the privacy concerns are becoming greater. In 2020, both 23andMe as well as this certainly is a risk that we'll talk about near the end of this video. When we get down to their adjusted earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, we see that they are losing money. The pro forma value of the company will be $3.4 billion. 81% of the company will still be owned by existing 23andMe shareholders. By the way, Virgin got involved with 23andMe way back in 2007 during their Series A funding round. So they've been with them or have known about them for a while. Additionally, note that Sir Richard Branson as well as Anne Wojcicki will each be investing $25 million of their own money into this company. I think it's great to see that these two leaders have a significant stake of their own money involved in this venture. Now let's talk about risks of investing in this company. Certainly one risk if you are a current VGAC shareholder or if you plan to purchase these shares before the merger takes place is that the merger doesn't actually take place. Again, this is dependent upon shareholder votes for the merger, but in general these things do tend to go through. What are the risks? Well, the big one that I see is the risk of government regulation. I mentioned earlier the concern about privacy. As this database gets larger, there will be more and more people who will have that concern about their privacy. Now, 23andMe did offer up some voluntary guidance for themselves on how they can try to assess this problem, but I have some concerns that the government, particularly the United States government, will get involved at some point in regulating this. And who knows how that will affect 23andMe's business. 23andMe has received authorization from the FDA for multiple tests. Several years ago, though, the FDA did prevent 23andMe from performing some of these tests until they could review the data and authorize it. Something similar to that could, of course, happen in the future. With the FDA, you always have to try to play by their rules. One nice thing is that 23andMe has already been down this pathway and has learned from their past problems and can apply that to future tests that they will be developing to try to head off FDA authorization problems. Another concern that I potentially see for them is competition. While they do have a very vast genetic library, other companies may try to get in on this once they see how much money this can generate. Now, one company actually did try to do something similar to this, and that was Ancestry.com. They recently announced, though, that they're giving up on this end of their business, and they're sticking more with the ancestry part of it and not the genetic database. And another risk is that their database proves not to be as fruitful as they expect. They are planning to double the number of target diseases that they are working on between now and 2024, but that, of course, is all dependent on the science. And if the science doesn't yield that amount, well, that certainly will affect their income streams. All right, that's it for 23andMe and VGAC. I hope this was helpful for you. I own some shares. I also own some warrants. I plan to hang on to both of them. Of course, those warrants become exercisable 30 days after a merger or 12 months after the initial IPO. So in this case, it will be in the fall of 2021 because that will be 12 months after the initial IPO. If this was interesting for you, I hope you'll give us a thumbs up. We'd love to have you as a subscriber, and please feel free to leave us some comments. Until next time, enjoy your investing.